The thunder crashed overhead as Daisy Harris pressed her back against the barn wall, her cheek throbbing from the force of her father's hand. The year was 1878, and in this forgotten corner of Wyoming territory, her screams would reach no one but the howling wind and indifferent cattle. Daisy was 20 years old, with honey-blonde hair that fell in tangled waves down her back and eyes the color of summer sage. Once full of life and laughter, those eyes now reflected only fear as her father advanced toward her, belt in hand, rage twisting his features into something barely human. "You worthless girl," Thomas Harris bellowed, his words slurring from the whiskey he'd been drinking since noon. "Your mother's been gone 3 years and you still can't keep this place running right." "Pa, please," Daisy begged, raising her hands defensively. "The drought killed the crops." "There was nothing I could do." "Nothing you could do," he sneered, swinging the belt. It cracked against the barn wall, missing her by inches as she ducked away. "Your brothers would have found a way. God took the wrong children when that fever came through." The words stung worse than any physical blow. Her brothers, James and William, had died alongside her mother in the epidemic of '75. Since then, her father had descended into bitterness and drink, and Daisy had become the target of his disappointment. The belt whistled through the air again, catching her arm this time. Daisy cried out, stumbling backward into a stack of hay bales. She'd endured her father's worsening temper for years, but tonight was different. There was a wildness in his eyes she'd never seen before. "Pa, you're not yourself," she pleaded, searching for any remnant of the man who'd once taught her to ride and read poetry by the fire. "Let me help you to bed. Things will look better in the morning." "Nothing's gonna look better," he roared, advancing on her. "The bank's taking the land. Everything your grandfather built, everything I worked for gone." His hand connected with her face again, knocking her to the ground. "And it's your fault." Daisy tasted blood as she crawled backward, desperate to escape. The barn door stood open behind her father, revealing the rain-soaked yard and the darkness beyond. If she could just get past him, maybe reach Mrs. Patterson's place 2 miles down the road. Her father seemed to read her thoughts. He kicked the barn door shut and loomed over her. "You're not going anywhere, not until you learn respect." The belt came down again and again. Daisy curled into herself, trying to protect her face, her ribs aching with each new blow. She'd never make it to morning if this continued. For the first time, she truly believed her father might kill her. Then, through the sound of rain and her own sobbing, came a new noise. Hoofbeats, approaching fast. The barn door crashed open, wood splintering as it was kicked inward. Cold air and rain swept in, along with a tall figure silhouetted by a flash of lightning. "That's enough," said a deep, steady voice. Her father whirled around, momentarily startled. "Who the hell are you? This is my property and this here is family business." The stranger stepped further into the lantern light. He was tall and lean, wearing a duster that dripped rainwater onto the barn floor. His dark hat was pulled low, but Daisy could see a strong jaw shadowed with stubble and eyes that assessed the situation with dangerous calm. "Don't look like family business to me," the stranger said. "Looks like a grown man beating a defenseless woman." Her father sneered. "She's my daughter. I'll discipline her as I see fit. Not anymore." The stranger moved with unexpected speed. Before her father could raise the belt again, the man had crossed the space between them and caught his wrist in a grip that made Thomas Harris wince. "You're making a mistake, mister," her father growled. "Wouldn't be my first," the stranger replied evenly, "but beating a woman is yours." With a quick twist, he forced her father to drop the belt, then pushed him back against a post. "The lady's coming with me." "The hell she is." Her father lunged forward, but the stranger was ready. A single punch connected with Thomas Harris's jaw, sending him sprawling to the ground, unconscious. The stranger turned to Daisy, who was still huddled against the hay bales, unable to believe what she'd just witnessed. He approached slowly, as one might a spooked horse, and knelt before her. "Name's Vincent York," he said, his voice gentler now. "Most folks call me Vince. Can you stand, miss?" Daisy nodded, though she wasn't certain. Her body ached everywhere and her legs trembled as she tried to rise. Vincent reached out a hand to steady her, and she flinched involuntarily. "I won't hurt you," he assured her, "but we need to leave before he wakes up. Where would we go?" Daisy asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Away from here," Vincent answered simply. "You can't stay. Next time he might not stop." Daisy looked at her father's crumpled form, then back to the stranger who had appeared like an avenging angel through the storm. She'd never left home before, never ventured farther than the neighboring town. But Vincent was right, there would be a next time, and it would be worse. "I need to get some things," she whispered. Vincent nodded. "Be quick." She hurried to the small room at the back of the barn, where she'd taken to sleeping on the worst nights, when her father's drinking made the house unsafe. Inside a wooden chest, she kept her most precious possessions. Her mother's silver hairbrush, a small Bible, a change of clothes, and the money she'd been saving from selling eggs and butter. Not much, but enough for a fresh start somewhere. When she emerged, Vincent was standing watch by the door, one eye on her father, who still hadn't moved. Outside, a horse snorted impatiently. "Ready?" he asked. Daisy nodded, clutching her small bundle to her chest. Vincent guided her outside to where his horse, a magnificent black stallion, waited in the rain. "This is Midnight," he said, patting the animal's neck. "He's strong enough to carry us both until we can get you your own mount." He helped her up onto the saddle, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. His arms came around her to take the reins, creating a protective circle that made Daisy feel both safe and intensely aware of his closeness. "Where are we going?" she asked as they rode away from the only home she'd ever known. "There's a town about 20 miles west," Vincent replied. "We can rest there, get those cuts tended to." As they rode through the darkness, the rain eventually stopped and the clouds parted to reveal a sky scattered with stars. Daisy found herself leaning back against Vincent's chest, exhaustion overwhelming her fear. "Why did you help me?" she asked softly. "You don't even know me." There was a pause before he answered. "Let's just say I know what it's like when the people who should protect you become the ones you fear most." His words held a story of their own, but Daisy was too tired to ask more. As they continued through the night, the gentle rhythm of the horse beneath them and the warmth of Vincent's body against her back lulled her into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in years. Dawn was breaking when they reached the small town of Riverton. The main street was quiet, with only a few early risers sweeping storefronts or delivering goods. Vincent guided Midnight to a modest 2-story building with a sign that read, "Widow Cooper's Boarding House." "Mrs. Cooper's an old friend," Vincent explained as he helped Daisy dismount. "She'll give you a safe place to stay while you figure out what comes next." Daisy's legs nearly buckled when she touched the ground, stiff from the long ride and her injuries. Vincent steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "Thank you," she said, suddenly shy in the daylight, aware of her disheveled appearance and the bruises that must be visible on her face. Vincent tipped his hat. "No need for thanks, Miss Harris." "Daisy," she corrected him. "Please call me Daisy." A small smile touched his lips. "Daisy, then." Mrs. Cooper turned out to be a robust woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She took one look at Daisy's face and ushered her inside without asking questions, shooting Vincent a knowing glance. "Room at the top of the stairs is ready," she told him. I'll bring up some hot water and breakfast once I've tended to this poor child." In Mrs. Cooper's kitchen, Daisy sat quietly while the older woman cleaned her cuts and applied salve to her bruises. The gentle touch nearly brought tears to her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness. "Vincent York's a good man," Mrs. Cooper said as she worked. "Doesn't say much about his past, but I know he rides for the law sometimes. Bounty hunter, occasional deputy. He has a cabin up in the hills where he goes when he's not working." "He saved my life," Daisy said simply. Mrs. Cooper nodded. "Not the first time he's brought someone in need to my door. Won't be the last, I expect." She finished bandaging a cut on Daisy's arm. "You're safe here, child. No one will harm you under my roof." After a hot bath and a change into the clean clothes she'd brought, Daisy felt almost human again. Mrs. Cooper led her to a small room on the second floor, where Vincent waited, standing by the window. He turned when they entered, and Daisy noticed how his gaze lingered on her, taking in the extent of her injuries in the clear morning light. Something like anger flashed in his eyes before he mastered it. "I've arranged for you to stay here," he said. "Mrs. Cooper will look after you." "You're leaving?" The question slipped out before Daisy could stop it, betraying more disappointment than she'd intended. "I need to make sure your father doesn't come looking for you," Vincent explained. "And you need time to heal, to decide what you want to do next. Will I see you again?" Daisy asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Vincent hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be back in a few days. Rest until then." True to his word, Vincent returned 3 days later. Daisy had spent the time helping Mrs. Cooper with chores around the boarding house, grateful for the older woman's company and the simple routine that helped keep her mind from dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. When Vincent walked through the door that afternoon, something inside Daisy brightened. He looked different in the daylight, younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30, with eyes the color of a summer storm and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Your father's telling folks you ran away," he reported after greeting Mrs. Cooper. "I made sure word spread that you were seen heading east toward Cheyenne. Should buy you some time." "Thank you," Daisy said, "though I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that time. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Vincent gestured to the porch. "Would you walk with me?" Outside, they strolled slowly down the quiet street. Daisy was conscious of the curious glances from townspeople, but Vincent seemed oblivious, or perhaps just unconcerned. "There's a ranch about 5 miles from here," he explained. "Belongs to an older couple, the Millers. They're looking for help since their daughter got married and moved to California. It would be honest work, and they're good people." "You've arranged a position for me?" Daisy asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. Vincent nodded. "If you want it. They're offering room and board plus a small wage. You'd have your own cabin on their property." Independence, something Daisy had never truly experienced. The prospect was both exhilarating and terrifying. "I don't know how to thank you." "Live your life," Vincent said simply. "That's thanks enough." 2 days later, Daisy found herself settled into a small but clean cabin on the Miller Ranch. As Vincent had promised, the elderly couple was kind, asking few questions about her past, and seeming genuinely pleased to have her help with cooking, cleaning, and tending the kitchen garden. Vincent visited regularly, initially under the pretense of checking on her welfare, then later with less obvious excuses. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a ribbon for her hair, fresh berries he'd picked on his travels, once even a book of poetry that reminded Daisy of happier times with her family. As spring turned to summer, Daisy's bruises faded and her spirit began to heal. She found joy in simple pleasures again, the satisfaction of kneading bread dough, the scent of laundry dried in the sunshine, the sound of birdsong at dawn. And increasingly, she found herself looking forward to Vincent's visits with an anticipation that made her heart beat faster. On a warm evening in July, Vincent arrived unexpectedly at the ranch. Mrs. Miller invited him to stay for supper, and afterward he asked Daisy to walk with him to the creek that ran along the edge of the property. "I'm heading out tomorrow," he said as they strolled beneath cottonwood trees that rustled softly in the evening breeze. "Marshall in Fort Laramie has asked for help tracking a gang that's been robbing stage coaches." Disappointment washed over Daisy. "How long will you be gone?" "Could be weeks," Vincent admitted. "These men know the territory and they're dangerous." They reached the creek and stood watching the water flow over smooth stones, golden in the last light of day. Daisy was acutely aware of Vincent beside her, of the space between them that seemed both too much and not enough. "I've grown fond of you, Daisy Harris," Vincent said suddenly, his voice low. "More than I should, perhaps." Daisy's breath caught in her throat. She turned to face him, gathering courage from somewhere deep inside. "I've grown fond of you too, Vincent York." He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Daisy leaned into the touch, closing her eyes briefly. "I'm not a man with much to offer," Vincent said. "My life isn't settled and I've got my share of ghosts." "I don't need much," Daisy replied. "Just honesty and kindness. You've given me both from the moment we met." Vincent's eyes searched hers as if looking for uncertainty or fear but found none. Slowly, he bent his head and kissed her, a gentle touch that held both question and promise. Daisy responded with a certainty that surprised her, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. When they parted, Vincent pressed his forehead to hers. "I'll come back to you," he promised. "When this job is done." "I'll be waiting," Daisy whispered. The weeks of Vincent's absence stretched longer than expected. Summer faded into autumn, and still there was no word. Daisy tried to keep busy with harvest preparations and canning, but worry gnawed at her constantly. Had he been injured? Killed? Had he simply decided that she wasn't worth returning for? Mrs. Miller noticed her distraction. "That man will return," she said confidently one evening as they sat shelling peas on the porch. "I've seen the way he looks at you, like a man who's found water after crossing a desert." "It's been nearly 2 months," Daisy said, unable to hide her concern. "Anything could have happened." "Vincent York is a survivor," Mrs. Miller replied. "My Herbert knew him years ago when Vincent was just starting out as a tracker. Said he never saw anyone with better instincts or a cooler head in danger." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Daisy stood, her heart racing as she shaded her eyes against the setting sun, watching the road that led to the ranch house. A rider appeared, but even at a distance, Daisy could tell it wasn't Vincent. This man was broader, rode differently. As he drew closer, she recognized Sheriff Barnes from Riverton. "Evening, ladies," he called, touching the brim of his hat as he dismounted. "Mrs. Miller, Miss Harris." "Sheriff," Mrs. Miller greeted him. "What brings you out our way?" "Message for Miss Harris," he replied, pulling an envelope from his vest pocket. "Come in from Fort Laramie yesterday." Daisy's hands trembled as she took the envelope. "Thank you," she managed to say, though her mouth had gone dry with fear. The sheriff declined Mrs. Miller's invitation to stay for supper, saying he needed to get back to town before dark. As soon as he had ridden away, Daisy tore open the envelope. The letter inside was brief, written in a strong, slanting hand. "Daisy, job ran long. Gang led us into Montana territory. I'm unharmed but delayed. Will return by first frost if not sooner. Keep safe. Yours." Vincent. Relief flooded through her, followed by a warm glow at that single word. "Yours." He was safe, and he was coming back to her. The first frost came early that year, dusting the fields and fences with white one late September morning. Daisy woke to the changed landscape and felt a surge of hope. She dressed with extra care, pinning her hair in a style Vincent had once admired, and went about her chores with renewed energy. By midday, there was still no sign of him, and Daisy tried to temper her expectations. First frost could be mere coincidence, not a precise promise of return. As evening approached, Mr. Miller asked Daisy to ride out to check on a heifer that was due to calve. She saddled the gentle mare they had given her to use and rode toward the north pasture, enjoying the crisp air and the golden light of late afternoon on the autumn landscape. The heifer seemed fine, showing no immediate signs of labor, so Daisy decided to return to the ranch house. As she turned her horse, a movement at the edge of the tree line caught her eye. A rider emerged from the shadows of the pines, heading toward her. Even at a distance, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he sat a horse. Her heart leapt as she urged her mare forward, breaking into a gallop across the field. Vincent saw her coming and stopped, dismounting just before she reached him. Daisy slid from her saddle and ran the last few steps, barely hesitating before throwing herself into his open arms. He caught her close, lifting her slightly off her feet in his embrace. His face was thinner than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes, but his smile was exactly as she'd carried in her heart all these weeks. "You're here," she breathed, scarcely able to believe it. "You came back." "I promised I would," Vincent said, setting her gently back on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. "Though it took longer than I expected. You're safe. That's what matters." Daisy reached up to touch his face, reassuring herself that he was real. "I missed you, Vincent York." "And I missed you, Daisy Harris." He bent to kiss her, no longer tentative but with a certainty born of separation and longing. Every day, every hour. As twilight gathered around them, they stood in each other's arms, sharing stories of the time apart. Vincent had tracked the gang through 3 territories, before finally helping to capture them in a mountain hideout. The fight had been fierce, leaving him with a bullet graze on his shoulder that had delayed his return further. "I thought of you constantly," he confessed, his fingers interlaced with hers as they walked their horses back toward the ranch. "It kept me going through the worst of it." "I thought of you too," Daisy said, "and prayed for your safety." "There's something I need to tell you," Vincent said, his tone growing serious. "Something about my past." Daisy's heart stuttered with apprehension, but she nodded for him to continue. "I grew up not far from here," he began. "My father was a hard man not unlike yours. He beat my mother regularly, and when I was old enough to interfere, he turned on me too." Vincent's jaw tightened at the memory. "When I was 16, he beat her so badly she didn't survive. I ran away that night, swearing I'd never be the kind of man he was." "Oh, Vincent," Daisy whispered, squeezing his hand. "That's why I couldn't ride past that night," he continued. "When I heard you crying out, saw what was happening through the barn door, I couldn't let history repeat itself." "You saved me," Daisy said simply, "in more ways than one." They reached the edge of the ranch yard as the first stars appeared overhead. Before they came into view of the house, Vincent stopped and turned to face Daisy. "I don't have much to offer," he said, echoing his words from months before. "I've been saving money from these jobs, enough to buy a small piece of land maybe, but I don't need land or money," Daisy interrupted gently. "I just need you." Vincent smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Well, that's good. Because I love you, Daisy Harris, and I was hoping you might consider becoming Daisy York." Joy burst through Daisy like sunshine after storm clouds. "Are you asking me to marry you, Vincent York?" "I believe I am," he replied, suddenly looking younger and almost boyishly uncertain. "Though I'm making a mess of it." "You're doing just fine," Daisy assured him, stepping closer. "And yes, I will marry you. I love you too." They were married by the town preacher 2 weeks later with Mrs. and Mr. Miller, Mrs. Cooper, and a few friends from Riverton in attendance. Vincent wore a new shirt and had his hair trimmed for the occasion. Daisy wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Miller had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair. After the ceremony, Vincent surprised Daisy by taking her to a small cabin nestled in a grove of aspen trees about 10 miles from town. "It's not much," he said as he carried her over the threshold, "but it's ours. I bought it last spring, been fixing it up when I could." Daisy took in the sturdy walls, the stone fireplace, the windows that would let in plenty of light. "It's perfect," she whispered, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "There's 20 acres that goes with it," Vincent continued, watching her reaction carefully. "Good water from the creek, enough grazing for a few horses and cows. Soil seems decent for a garden." "You did all this without telling me?" Daisy asked, amazed by his foresight. "Wanted it to be a surprise." Vincent shrugged. "And I suppose I needed to prove to myself as much as to you that I could offer you a real home." Daisy wrapped her arms around his neck. "Home isn't about the place, Vincent. It's about the person you share it with." Their life together wasn't always easy. The land demanded hard work, and sometimes Vincent still took tracking jobs when they needed extra money. But they faced each challenge together, their bond strengthening through shared struggles and joys. A year after their wedding, Daisy gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Vincent's mother. 2 years later came a son, Michael. The children grew strong and happy, knowing only love and gentle guidance from their parents. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the work was done, Daisy and Vincent would sit on their porch watching their children play in the yard, and Daisy would remember that stormy night when a stranger had appeared in her darkest moment and changed the course of her life. "What are you thinking?" Vincent would ask, noting her contemplative expression. "Just how fortunate I am," Daisy would reply, leaning against his shoulder. "How one moment of courage, yours and mine, both led to all of this happiness." And Vincent would take her hand, the same gentle strength in his touch that had steadied her that first night, and say, "Not fortune, Daisy. Love. It was always love that saved us both." As the years passed, their small homestead flourished into a prosperous ranch. Vincent's reputation as a fair businessman and skilled horseman spread throughout the territory, bringing buyers from as far as Denver for his carefully bred stock. Daisy became known for her hospitality, and the school she started in their home for neighboring children too far from town to attend regularly. Thomas Harris never came looking for his daughter. They heard through travelers that he had died alone during a harsh winter, the farm lost to the bank as he had feared. Daisy mourned the father he had once been, before grief and alcohol had twisted him, and she taught her children that forgiveness, while difficult, was essential for one's own peace. On their 20th anniversary, Vincent took Daisy back to the creek where they had shared their first kiss. The cottonwoods were larger now, their leaves shimmering silver green in the same golden evening light. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't ridden by your farm that night?" Vincent asked as they stood watching the water flow, much as they had 2 decades earlier. Daisy considered the question. "I believe we were destined to find each other," she said finally. "If not that night, then somehow. Some souls are meant to journey together." Vincent smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with happiness rather than hardship now. "Well, Mrs. York, I'm mighty glad our journeys converged when they did." "As am I, Mr. York," Daisy replied, leaning into his embrace just as naturally as she had that first time. "As am I." And as the sun set on another day of their shared life, Daisy reflected that love wasn't just about dramatic rescues or passionate declarations. It was about the thousand small moments that followed the daily choice to be kind, to be brave, to forgive, to build something lasting together. It was about creating a home where shadows couldn't reach and where light always found its way in, even on the darkest nights.